Hey guys, this is a bonus video that I'm making for one of my chess.com friends and followers, Max, who has expressed an interest in the London system, and it says he's enjoying playing it and getting some good results. So what I thought I would do is put together a selection of a few of my best wins, all playing the London system as white, because you know that if you've seen some of my videos, you'll know that I enjoy playing the same kind of setup as black sometimes, right? Everyone against a player rated at least 1200, and also all of these games finished inside of 20 moves. So I think I've got 7 games I want to share with you. So let's just kick straight off, right? The London system, d4, d5, and then bishop to f4. So the idea is that we're going to push these pawns forward to make a nice dark squared pyramid, very solid structure. But before you do that, you want your dark squared bishop to be outside of that pyramid. Okay, so that's why you play bishop to f4 on the second move. Okay, so here my opponent plays e6 and I play e3, so we've got a kind of a symmetrical system. But here there's a break, c5. You see this quite often, particularly with stronger players. c5 is a very common break. And here I don't play the normal pawn to c3, but I play knight to c3 instead. Pawn takes and queen takes. Now the knight comes out to hit the queen, and the queen moves across to a4, pinning the knight against the king. Bishop breaks the pin, and now the knight comes in. So that if this knight moves now, then my queen is not under direct attack. Black moves his knight away, and can you see the evil finish to this game? Boom! Knight to d6, and that is a smothered checkmate. And the end of the game. Beautiful, beautiful finish. Let's go on to game number 2. Alright, d4, d5, bishop to f4, e6, e3. We've seen this before. Same again with the c5 break, and again knight to c3, pawn takes, knight now comes out to b5, pawn advances to e5 hitting the bishop, bishop takes pawn, another pawn comes out to attack the bishop, and the knight comes in to c7 hitting the both the king and the rook with a lovely fork. And here I mean, I can take the rook on the next turn if I choose, but here I decide to do an in-between move and actually capture the f6 pawn, putting the king in check. I'm not 100% sure why I played that move at the time, but then I go ahead and capture the rook, and now the knight moves out, so black would like to regain some material by capturing my knight. I grab the pawn, bishop comes out to hit the queen. I break that with f3, bishop retreats, and now queen to e2 with check. And now the bishop moves back to block the attack. I castle long, black recovers the knight, and now I bring my knight out to h3, seeing as f3 is covered by a pawn, e2 is occupied by my queen. Black pushes h6 in order to take away the option of g5 for my knight, because that would come with an attack against the bishop, which is actually pinned against the king. But it's I have 2 options, 2 squares I could have gone to achieve the same thing. So now we have 2 attackers against the bishop. So black moves his queen over to c8 to defend the bishop, and now I come in with knight to g6, forking the king and the rook. King has to move. If you're in check by a knight, you either have to capture the knight or you have to move. And now I grab the other rook, so I'm now 6 points in front in terms of material, and black here resigns the game. And the next one, 10-minute rapid game. I can't see my opponent's ratings on here, but there's a variety, all above 1200. Right, d4 and d5, of course, bishop to f4, and c5 again. c3 is played, so in case of c captures d4, I can play c captures d4 myself. and the knight out to c6, knight out to f3, knight out to f6, and e3. So this is a very familiar structure now. So the normal London setup would be to bring your bishop to d3, your knight to d2 in front of your queen, and that gives you a very, very solid start to the game. E6. Now my bishop comes out to b5, pinning the knight. Bishop breaks the pin. Knight to d2. A6 to kick the bishop, and the bishop simply retreats to a4 in this case. It could have come back to its natural normal square on d3, but not in this instance. Now b5 is pushed, once more kicking the bishop, so it comes back to c2. So it's now looking at this corner of the board. There's no way black's going to be castling queenside at this point in time. Black now pushes his pawn to c4, effectively locking off the middle of the board here. But that's all fine for me. And now a common motif, and this is a tactic that I've used multiple times, a pattern that I've used quite often in the London system, which is to drop the bishop back so it's behind the queen, then I put the queen in front, and the idea is if we can get rid of this knight to attack h7 and hopefully get a checkmate. So bishop comes out, so black's just preparing to castle. I send my knight in, knight takes, bishop takes, and now my bishop is hitting the f6 knight. If black were to castle, the f6 knight is the only defender of h7, so can you spot the continuation? Castles. Now I put my queen onto c2. You can see here how I'm trying to avoid lining up all my pieces in a very obvious way. So, you know, first I put my bishop back to c2, then back to b1, and then I go in with the knight, and then there's the exchange of pieces in the middle. Then he castles, and then I move my queen, right? So I'm trying to conceal my intentions to some degree. Now, this is the critical point where black really needs to be very alert to the possibility of the checkmate on h7. And what he does is he moves his knight out of the way, completely missing the threat, it seems. Queen to h7 is a very satisfying checkmate. Next game, d4, d5, bishop to f4, and knight out to c6. This is one of the most common responses. Knight to f3. It's very typical when your opponent brings out their knight for you to bring out your opposite knight, because they both can cover these squares. You don't want to let the knight in to those squares. And now h6 is played, preventing my knight from coming in here, or even my bishop. So I carry on with my normal structure, c3, bishop comes in, e3, bishop grabs the knight, and now queen recaptures rather than the rook. Capturing with the queen does still leave me the possibility of castling queenside if I choose to at some point. Now knight to f6, I bring out my light square bishop to pin the knight, kicks, retreats, kicks, retreats. Okay, you can start to see a theme that we've already seen before maybe emerging here. Okay, e6 is played, and now I move my queen to d3 in front of my bishop on that diagonal. Bishop comes out. Now this is very common, so by moving your bishop onto f4 on the second move, this bishop move is seen very often in the London system, and the normal response, most typical textbook response, is to drop the bishop back to g3 so that if takes on g3 you can recapture with your h-pawn, giving yourself a semi-open file for your h-rook. So I drop my bishop back. Indeed, he captures, I recapture, and now black castles. I castle long, knight comes in, blocking off this diagonal towards the king. And he's also, of course, threatening. Knight takes f2 with a three-way fork. Classic knight three-way fork. Now, maybe that's not too much of a problem. So I drop my bishop back to c2. Oh no, a three-way fork. Black is going to win material, only he isn't, because he again failed to spot the checkmate threat, got greedy, got overexcited, and in his excitement went after material, forgetting that king safety comes first. There we go. That's game number 4. Game number 5. Same 3 openings, and now knight to f6. Also common, defends the d5 pawn, makes perfect sense. e3, bishop to f5, bishop to d3. Now, it doesn't really make much sense for black to capture this bishop, because he will then have moved his bishop twice, and then it disappears from the board, and my queen is now active in the game. So he plays e6. I capture his bishop now, forcing his pawns to double, and also this e-file to become semi-open. And now I just carry on with c3, completing my pyramid. Knight to c6, knight to f3, bishop comes out, bishop drops back, exchange. Okay, we've seen it all before. Now the queen comes out, so is black thinking about castling long, perhaps? Knight to d2, h6 is played, stopping my knight from, again, coming into this square. And queen to b3 now. So there's a pawn hanging on b7. Of course, if I was to capture that, and then the rook comes across, I can't capture this pawn because of the knight, can't capture this pawn because of the queen, so I probably have to retreat to a6 and could then lose a pawn there. So I choose not to do that at that point. Now black does indeed castle long, and I retreat my queen to c2. Black moves his king across because my queen is now looking at an undefended pawn here on f5. Queen comes in and grabs the pawn, and black pushes a6. My knight starts to maneuver itself round, and that looks like a blunder to me for black to put his knight on a5. I grab the knight, and black puts his h-rook behind his queen, starting to line up against my king. So I now move up. Black's knight comes in, but there's no real threat of check at this point. So I'm thinking maybe b3. Yep, queen to b3 seems like a good idea. Now, if black is, again, too concerned with his own ideas and forgets to watch his own king's safety and defense, then he could fall foul here. I don't really see the point of that move in particular. Moving the king to a8, because queen in to b7 is a lovely checkmate. Game number 6. Same 3 moves. Knight to f6, e3 is played, knight to c6, c3 is played. Pawn comes out, so black's got a decent pawn structure of his own. Bring my bishop out to d3, its natural place. Knight to d2 is natural. a6 is played, and there knight to f3, and you have the standard default London system setup. Okay, so picture this in your mind. There are various move orders that you can use, but this is the classic London setup. Castle's kingside, and now knight comes into e5, which is very often a target for white to try and occupy that square. Black's knight now comes back to attack the bishop. Bishop goes to g3, which we've seen as a motif already when attacked by black's dark square bishop. Here it's being attacked by a knight. Knight captures, and guess what we're going to do? H captures, and now we have 2 pieces actually looking at the h7 square. Black attacks the knight, so I'm guessing that there is actually almost a free move here. I mean, white could capture the pawn with check, forcing the king to move. If the king were to move there, the bishop could move away again with a discovered check. If the king, so if bishop goes there and the king decides to go here to f7, the bishop could always move back to g6, where it's protected by the knight, and that would look like checkmate to me. Let's see what happens in the game. Yeah, indeed. So I forget about the attacked knight because this next move comes with check, and indeed the king moves to h8 because moving to f7 would indeed be checkmate. So now my bishop can come back with a discovered check. King has to move back to g8, And now my queen comes in, so my knight's still under attack. It's been under attack for several moves now. But the queen coming in, this is going to be absolutely devastating. There's nowhere that that black king can go. So we've got knight takes knight, and now queen to h8, checkmate. Okay, if you've got the stomach for one more, here's a final one. This is a 30-minute game. d4, d5, bishop to f4. Knight to c6 and e3. Bishop coming out to f5 is quite typical. Now pawn to a3, preventing the knight from coming in. I don't want, for example, knight to come in here and then to capture on c2 with a fork on my king and my rook. So a3 is a prophylactic move. Knight to f6, knight to c3. And now e5 is played. So creating some tension here. We've got, it's attacking my pawn and my bishop, so pawn takes. Knight can't recapture because we've simply got bishop recaptures. So he moves his other knight around where it is protected by the bishop, and now he has two pieces attacking that pawn. But that knight could be kicked away fairly easily, indeed, f3, and we have knight captures. Whoa! And now queen takes d5. That is an aggressive move. Okay, so the queen's obviously protected by the knight here. Black now moves queen to d6. Guessing there is a point to this. I mean, it's defending the knight and the pawn, so fairly good central situation. If queen takes, he can develop his bishop out. So I simply push up e4, queen takes, knight takes, clearly threatening c7 with a fork. That would not be good for black. But now the bishop comes back. Maybe, did he see the fork? Did he miss it? Okay, knight captures c7 with check. Knight captures rook. Now knight comes down, forgetting, I think, that knight was busy defending this knight. However, black's got ideas of his own to come in and capture the mirror pawn on c2. But now I can imagine the next move. Yeah, long castle, there you go. Immediately pinning this knight to the king. So this knight cannot move, legally cannot move. And this knight's now undefended. So that's a, yeah, in fact, so he's got two pieces under attack. Right, so we've got bishop attacking that knight, we've got rook attacking that knight, and what I don't understand is why he didn't move the knight back. So you can move one out of the threat and at the same time defend the other one. So odd move. Bishop captures the knight. King moves out of the way with a discovered attack from the rook, but that's okay because the knight can come to safety. Pawn pushes. Bishop takes knight, so now we've got two pieces attacking, and black here resigns. So there you go. The London system, according to some people, has a reputation for being a bit solid, a bit safe, a bit boring, but I don't think so at all. I had very, very good results with this. I've been working through a lot of my old games on chess.com, working up from breaking through 1000 to 1100, 1200, and I used the London system very effectively there. It's also used by the world's very, very best players. Magnus Carlsen plays London system. It's a perfectly reasonable system, and if you like to attack, and I like attacking in risky games, then there's no reason not to try this out for yourself. It's very easy to learn. Definitely recommended. So that's for you upon request. Hope it's been inspiring for you. If you like this kind of video, just let me know. What do you like? Do you like live games? Do you like seeing multiple examples like this one where we go through games quite quickly for inspiration? Just put a comment in. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you like. Let me know what you don't like. It's all good. Right. See you soon, guys.